I would like to issue a correction from last week. There was a question last week about whether or not you could get access to a printable version of the CAST interim assessment as well as the answer key. And the answer is yes. However, a couple of caveats. First, it is a secure resource, hence the red padlock in the upper right in my hand, right hand corner of your screen. That means you need to sign into Tom's. You need to have a Tom's account. You have to have access to Tom's to get that. In order to get it in Tom's, you would simply go to the resources, go to Cast Interim Secure Materials, as you can see on the screen on the left, pick the grade level, and there will be two options. The one you're looking for is called Test Content and Answer Key. There's also a training guide in exemplars that has kind of rubrics as well as student samples of the extended responses. So again, secured resource. If you do print it, it needs to be controlled and then shredded. It cannot go home with students, cannot be put up on a learning management system, but that does exist for those of you who asked about it last week. All right, I turn it over to our presenters for the evening.
Okay, well, I'm going to start by reminding us where we left off and where we are, including a brief overview of things. Remember, our four parts here. Come again next week for part three. And just to give you a sense of what those sessions all are in words, last time we looked at what the cast looks like in general. Session two here today, we're going to talk about how do you take it. And we're going to specifically make sure that everybody can take it with identifying some accessibility resources so you can get your students ready and also look at some actual test items today. Session three, how to prepare for it, talking about science performance tasks and how we can analyze data. And then session four has the very exciting opportunity of building your own CAST-like assessments, creating your own performance tasks that really fit in with your teaching and with what you want to do, but also help prep people for things. So these are sessions to look forward to in the future. Today's session has two halves. I will handle the first half, talking about accessibility resources for all students, and then Arlene will take over and tell you about some of the test question types and some of the supports that are there, and we'll have a little bit of closing at the end from our LACOE team telling us all about more opportunities to learn. We showed this last time, but if you weren't here last time, you just remember that the cast has been building and building and building and getting better and growing and changing, and that we are using the 2022 revision of the revised blueprint of CAST, which is slightly different than what CAST started at. But if you've been looking at it over the last few years, it will be the same again this year in terms of its overall general strategy, a few minor changes. But and then, of course, CAST is now appearing on the dashboard as we talked about last time. We also emphasized last time that you can't teach to the test in the sense that test writers were specifically instructed to present students with phenomena that they're unlikely to have seen before. And we gave this fun little example here of a butterlope and said, a question that could appear on any level of the cast is how might the butterlope's ears help it survive, grow, or reproduce? And students would need to be able to bring to bear their knowledge about how life works, and they'd be at any level they could have a different level of understanding of that. From elementary, they might be able to answer that. In middle school, they'd be able to answer it in a more sophisticated way, and in high school, an even more sophisticated way. So you need to help teach them those underlying principles and the way of approaching a new thing that they've never seen before. With something like this will never appear on the cast because it only actually has real things on it. That's one of the other requirements they gave the test makers. They're supposed to be real questions, but I like this picture a lot. We also are in our review session reminding you about these tests being cumulative. You are not giving a fifth grade test, an eighth grade test, or an 11th grade test. These are all middle school, all elementary school, and all high school standards done in that test. So make sure that everybody in your school site is working towards that same mission and not just saying, oh, I'm not tested my year, I don't need to worry about it. And that is not what you are supposed to be saying. You're supposed to be saying, this is a test that's going to assess our whole school program in science. We told you last time about the CAST, but most students are taking by a computer the alternate assessment in science, which special education needs students are using. And we also introduced you to the interim assessments. And Sarah started off a few moments ago reminding us about all the great resources that they have for answer keys and example student work and how to use those things. So let's jump into looking again at the CAST, which had this 6 segments here, including several performance tasks, and really giving your students a chance to both show their knowledge in these individual discrete items and the slightly more involved 4 to 6 items on a single topic that they're really going to dig into in each of those subject areas of life science, earth science, and space science, and physical science. So we have one of each of those, plus some magical and mysterious test sort of field test items that are embedded somewhere in the test so that you never know where they are. So be ready. Every question on the test might be one that matters. So we need to teach our students that. So that was last time. That was the recap. This time, we have this essential question, which is how can we make sure that all students are able to share their learning in science on the CAST, regardless of any of their special accessibility needs that they might have? And the CAST is like all of the other tests given through our state system, has many different supports that are built in. So if you're familiar with those from the other tests, many of the same exact features are available here. A few of them are unique to each the subject matter areas, but there's this nice single diagram that kind of highlights all of them. It has not been updated for 2025-26 yet, but when you do click on the links from our slides, you'll get access to the old ones. But it's very similar. There's only a few things that I'm told are going to change. I have this diagram here that's on the right. I have a different way of showing it that I think helps me understand what all these is. There's a lot of going on here, so I'm going to kind of break it down to you in this slide. There are basically kind of 4 levels of support for different people that have different levels of needs. The top set is the universal tools that are available by or to everyone by default. They have all students have access to this. There are things that are there for them, and that's the top level. Below that, there's some things that are designated supports, and by designated, what that means is you must designate and assign those to students specifically. But no student needs any special eligibility to be in that assigned group. Anybody can get them turned on if you, as the test administrator, turn them on for that student. For the next level down are things that are called accommodations, and for those are for students that are in order to be qualified to get those turned on, they'll need to have their IEP or 504, and we have sort of want to make sure that those are not just being given out to everybody, but they are to people that actually need them. And should your student need so many accommodations that really the whole computerized test thing isn't for them, your testing team can decide that they should be given the California alternate assessment, that last level of support on the list. So let's go through each of these colors bit by bit here and start off by talking a little bit, I guess, about some of our. Oh, I guess this is a clarification about what we mean by designated supports, and it says the same things that I said before, is that they're available to any student when it's determined that they actually need them. They're turned on a student by student data basis, and we really don't want to just turn them on just for the heck of it for a student. We're trying to turn on supports that they would get if they were having those same level of supports in their daily instruction, or if they're something you might be doing, even though they're not part of an official 504 form or something like that, but they're things that you would be giving them as supports because they need them. So be ready for that. And uh, even further detail about this appropriate use here is that we're not assigning resources on a global scale. We're just really trying to make sure that these are turned on for people that need them, which means that they do need to be assigned in advance. And you need to be thinking ahead about these. And that's kind of one of the great things about all of you who are here on this call right now. You are thinking ahead and you have been planning ahead. And so you know about this, and it's going to be coming uh, up on you where you're going to have to make these decisions about how to enter things in as a test administrator about the students in your classes. All right, let's get into some fun and talk about what are the options on the menu here. Um, Available to everyone by default are these universal tools. They are my favorite. Um, there's a calculator. There's not a lot of calculation that students are going to need to do in the cast, but fifth graders get a basic four function calculator. Middle school and high school get a scientific calculator that's accessible to them. It's the same calculator that's available to them in their math things, I believe. So is that true? I think so. Yeah. So we got a digital notepad where you can record notes on a question. There's a glossary for certain words. There's a highlighter that they can use. They can use keyboard navigation. There's a line reader they can turn on. You can mark things. Um, there's the embedded ruler and protractor. I don't think that's actually I've never seen that in the science realm of things, but um, are most things that they will need are not going to be using a ruler for. They're going to be reading charts and data tables and graphs and things. So not super important. Uh, there are these science charts. I think we showed them last time that have formulas on them so that your students don't need to memorize any formulas. They're up available on the right. They can also turn off certain answer choices by hitting strike through to make them go away. And when they're writing, they get to make things bold and italics. They get to do a little bit of rich text entry when they're writing their free response questions. And they can zoom in and zoom out to get there. So those are all the embedded universal tools that are available to students. But I want to point out there are also non-embedded, and that just means they're real world. They're things that you actually can give to any student. You can give them breaks, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. And you can give them scratch paper. So both of those things are things that you should be planning ahead to give to your students so that they all have access to them and telling them ahead of time. So rather you can ask your question in the chat or wait just a few moments as we'll get to a good break for questions here. So we talked about breaks. I said that they're there. So remember, there is no time limit for the CAST exam. Tests can actually span multiple days even. There are some things that we need to make sure we're trying to not spread it out too much, but breaks can be allowed at any time. But if you do have a student stopping for more than 20 minutes, they can't go back to any of the previous questions if they're in the discrete item test. And so, uh, like I said, there's no reason to keep students locked up if there's an absolute need for them to get out. We encourage them to stay focused, but you are there, and there's a little bit more information about pausing and expiration here, about what expires in their attempts on our slides and in the chat that you see. Um, Now, I said those things are all allowed, but not just allowed. Dr. Matt recommends breaks that I would say that I would highly recommend in between cast segments that you get your students standing up and moving, gets their blood flowing in their brain and boosts their performance. And so we're highly recommending that you take advantage of this and not just have the students sit through, even if they want to get it all done. It helps them to take some breaks periodically. Personal opinion. All right, so some designated support, which you must turn on for a specific student, includes some color contrast things, some changes to the mouse pointer. Um, so I'm not familiar with the streamlining of ELA resources. So if somebody can chime in on that, Sarah, do you have a quick description of that?
Yeah, sometimes it does a split screen so that some questions are on the side and some questions on the front, and then you're able to have them all in one page so that the content is on the top and the question is on the bottom. There's a
Excellent.
great video that goes over it. I will try and locate it.
Oh, we actually aren't. We don't. It's one of the ones we don't have a link to, so we should. No. Text to speech can be turned on so they can hear the questions. Some translation options and some new things coming into translation. I'm told to make it so that students have even more flexibility about the language that they see things in between Spanish and English. Um, and you can also, should you be worried that one of your specific students will be distracted by some of the universal tools, you can also turn those off for certain students if that's an agreed upon, if that's in the best interest, they don't get distracted by them. And the caveat here um, to make sure you have headphones if you're going to be using text to speech, because we've got a lot of people in one room all at once. All right. So there are a lot of things that you can provide to students that are not part of the system that are able to be turned on for any student that you all agree upon. Things like a calculator that they can have in real life. Um, the multiplication table is not really that useful for our science, but it's allowed apparently. Read aloud and let's see here. Print. You can have printed formula charts. The one here that I think is coolest for folks that really do need this, especially if they've broken their arm and they can't type on the CAS test, you can get a scribe for them, and you can put them in a room with an individual trained scribe who will do all the writing for them for that student that needs that special service. And you can also, there's approved simplified test directions and translated test directions that are also available for specific students, all things that you need to be aware of so that you can provide them, because they're not just things that you can turn on or turn off in the system. They're things you need to be ready and prepared for. So learn about those here in this link right here. So it's important for us to think about here, just sort of making sure that we're talking about accessibility is about equity, and trying to make sure that we are giving extra attention to this. Is that the embedded supports are easy to turn on and turn off in the computer, but most students don't know that they're eligible for certain things. So you need to be thinking about that ahead of time for all of your students. And like we said, with the non-embedded supports, the real world things, uh, if you aren't thinking about that ahead of time, the students don't get those things because they're things that you at the site need to provide to the students. And we just want to make sure that everybody's thinking about that always ahead of time for all of the students so that they all get access to the things that they are entitled to. So, how are you going to figure out which of those things will work for your students and which ones make sense for them? Well, the first thing is to try to familiarize with them. Uh, Maya Angelou tells us, do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. And in order to do that, it helps to do things like take the practice tests and have them try this out. Our practice tests and our interim assessments all use the authentic CAST interface. And so that means that you can actually try all these things out and turn them on in a very low stakes environment where they can work on that. So you can run a scavenger hunt specifically for the technology so that they know about all the universal supports that are available to them. You can get those non-embedded supports and show them to them, explain the options to the students ahead of time so that they don't come into the test and say, hey, you're going to have a scribe, and they don't know what that means or how they're supposed to use that to their advantage. Um, and asking students what they think they might need. It can work, especially for some of our older students, as they've taken some of these tests before, and getting them to reflect on what worked for them and what didn't. And then, of course, being ready to provide what they need. You're especially thinking about site logistical plans. If you have a lot of students that need special supports, like a lot of students that needed scribes, a lot of students that needed translation, how are you going to handle all of those things? Do you have enough headphones for all those students for those text-to-speech needs? Making sure that that's all there. And we have some links to some scavenger hunts that some of our friends have put together here. And they're organized around I can statements. I can find the calculator and use it, show other students how to use it, those sorts of things. So you can really get there, and you can make your practice tests fun by giving students teams and having them the tools trying to get through there. Uh, Really having fun sharing their responses. You can go through the practice of the training test together as a class, and the note that the training test doesn't have the answers available to you anywhere, so you have to figure out the answers ahead of time. And
You may
and
I share something?
oh, sure.
We had a training recently with a teacher, and because the practice and training tests are completely open source and you can use any grade level, she was sharing one of the things she liked to do was take some of the questions and use Kahoot. Because you
Mm.
can copy and paste these anywhere, you can go down to a lower grade level and paste these questions in and have your students practice with them so they can see the format of the questions and kind of what's expected. That way you can kind of level up the fun of it and level down the intensity of a test. Thank you, Matthew.
Yay. Yeah, and just trying to work on different ways to get these practices done, because this is in our accessibility part of things, partly because putting the students all on an even playing field of having seen the test before, so that they know what to expect and what types of answers they're expected to give. Um, So just look through some other ideas here. I don't want to belabor all of these different ideas of how to make things fun. Many of you are trained professionals at making things fun for your students. Um, so that brings us to, I believe, a little bit of a look inside the cast questions. And so, Arlene, are you ready to take over here and share with us some of these questions?
Yes. Are you going to keep sharing your screen? Is
I'll
that
keep
good?
sharing my screen if that
That
works. Yeah.
sounds perfect. Okay, so just let's reiterate that when you're preparing your students, you really have to use all three dimensions. Okay, so remember, this is not just about the DCIs. 2/3 of the test is going to be on the practices and the cross-cutting concepts. Every test item has at least two of the dimensions, so you really need to have a well-rounded curriculum. Okay, so next we're just going to go through a couple of different types and then look at some examples. Okay, so first we have our just traditional multiple choice, just there's one answer there, and then there's a drag and drop where students can actually drag certain choices into a specific area. Then there's also highlighting a certain part of a diagram or a picture where they would like either manipulate it or talk about it, fill in, typical like just a short phrase or a word. And then there's going to be constructive responses. So this is where they're actually going to have to write kind of like somewhat like an essay. And depending on the grade level is going to depend on the complexity. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at some examples. So in this example, and we're going to look at the discrete items first. So in this example, we're talking about perch, okay, a type of fish. Now, a student wouldn't need to know anything really about the perch because all the information is given within the question, right? They know, oh, it's a fish and it's living in a kelp forest. And then it's given this diagram, which then they can actually manipulate. Okay, and so they investigate a little bit and then they go on to answer the question. So they're given this food web and then asked to predict what changes would occur in the relationships between the different organisms. So they're going to drag the increase decrease remains the same, right, into the relative change depending on the relationship. So here's an example of a drag and drop. Okay, then in our next, we have, here we have a car. So we have races going on. And this is about kinetic energy. So in the graph, notice here that the students can manipulate the graph in order to move the amount of kinetic energy for car number 5, up or down, depending on the question. And then once they have done that, then they're asked to do a short little calculation. So like Matthew was saying, there is a formula sheet. Although there's a lot of stuff in the formula sheet, which, I think it's a good idea to practice with the students of what is really critical, because otherwise you're going to get lost in the weeds. Okay, so that would be a good thing there. So this would be an example of a calculation or a fill in, and then also you're manipulating the graph. Okay, and then we have a traditional multiple choice with a little bit of a twist because it says which statement best describes the results. So always have to be careful. The students have to be careful with these because some of them may be accurate statements, but not really answer the question. And so they just need to read all of the choices. I think that is another good skill that students need to learn to do, is not just oh, here's an answer that looks good and pick that one. Read all of the choices. So you could like put the correct answer at the last one. That would be good practice when you're going over it. Okay, so it's an example in multiple choice. And then here's a lab experiment where students are given a claim. Some metals change temperature more rapidly than other metals. And then they're given some metals, iron, copper, aluminum, and then asked, well, what pieces of equipment would you need to actually conduct the experiment? Okay, so hopefully they would obviously clue in to temperature and kind of be thinking about, well, what other things would we need in order to see if the temperature is changing? And then here's an example of a performance task. So remember, a performance task is going to have one phenomena. Now it could build on itself, right? So you start with an introduction and then maybe it grows and adds more information. Typically, that's what happens. And then there are questions to the right of the phenomena. And so in this case, there's like a drag and drop question. And I really think you really need to practice drag and drops with students because, you know, especially our English language learners, our multi-language learners, I really, with my students, I recommend that they write out the sentence and then put the answers in it so that then it's like, oh, that does make sense, or no, that's not what I mean. Because that is, you know, can get really difficult for some students if it's a second language. And then in this example, it's just a multiple choice question. And then you'll notice in the next slide that it's going to add on. So the first part was talking about the thistles. And now we're like, oh, now we have some organisms that are eating the thistles, right? And then some information. Now, students don't need to know anything about a weevil or anything like that because the information is given within the actual question. And so really what it's targeting is, well, can students actually think, right? Can they use the practices and be able to think about what's going on and then answer questions? You know, we don't want them to memorize things like what's a weevil. We want them to be able to be given information and then use that information. And so in this case, then we have a multiple choice and then a constructive response. So just notice that the practice or the performance task will usually build on the phenomena, and then you'll have multiple questions that are being asked about that phenomena. Okay, so then if we move on, we're going to look at some performance tasks, but first let's go over some of the things that are characteristics of them, right? Like I was saying, it's a multi-question sequence based on one phenomena. And maybe you notice that on the left, it's going to be on the information, and on the right is going to be the questions. And then you can go back and forth between. So just if the student is like looking at the second part of the phenomena, they can go back and read the other part in case they, you know, needed a reminder for themselves. And then every performance task will have a written response as one of the questions that's attached to it. Okay, so definitely writing is something that students are going to need to do. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to look at a question, and then we're going to look at a rubric and kind of analyze some student work. Okay, so in this case, we have paramecium. Okay, it tells you that it's a single-celled freshwater organism, and you can look at it under a microscope, and it gives you a little picture. Okay, then it also goes on to give you a graph. So a scientist basically was studying the growth of the paramecium, and notice that at the very beginning, that it had a very steep curve and was growing rapidly. And then once it reached its carrying capacity, then it was leveling off. So in this question, it's a constructive response. So we're going to go ahead and go through the rubric, and what you're supposed to be, or what the student, I should say, is supposed to be doing is explaining why at the very beginning that the growth is very rapid, and then once it reached carrying capacity, why it levels off. Okay, so that's what the student is going to respond to. And then okay, so just a couple of things with the scoring. So there's obviously all the questions are based on a PE. Okay, so here basically we're going to go over a key. The key represents, you know, what is supposed to be there, and incorporates just not only the rubric, but some exemplars. So what's part of that is going to be the performance expectation. There we go. Okay, so which kind of links everything together. Then obviously the SEP, the DCI, and then the cross-cutting concepts are all going to be a portion of that PE because they're all linked together. So remember, even though in class, it's as long as you are incorporating or you're incorporating your practices and your cross-cutting concepts, they don't have to match what's on the PE. But be aware that anything on the test is going to match the PE. Okay, so now let's go ahead and we can look at the practice item that goes with this. So it gives you the PE that it's a middle school life science. Then the practice is to analyze and interpret data. The DCI is basically the relationships in ecosystems. The cross-cutting concept is cause and effect. And then the item level claim statement, right, is basically, well, how are resources affecting the growth, right? When you have lots of resources versus very few resources. So then if we go ahead and look at the, excuse me, we're going to be looking at the rubric. So this is worth 2 points. Okay, and that's typical. So 1 point is that it's saying that at point A, remember that's at when it's moving up on the graph, that the resources are plentiful. And so the population is going to grow really rapidly because there's no limit to the resources. Then in addition, the student has to state that at point B, where it's the carrying capacity, now there's a limit to the resources, which means that's going to limit the population because there's not as many resources to support a higher population. Okay. And so the exemplar they're giving is that at point A, the paramecium population is growing rapidly because there's plenty of food. And at point B, the growth rate slows down because now there are more paramecium than the food supply, and the food supply is limited. Okay, so that's why there's a decrease. So let's go ahead and look at some different exemplars. Maybe I think we have time where you can just respond in the chat. So let's see, this is out of 2 points. Okay, so for example A, it says it is growing rapidly at point A because there was abundant resources. But once the population reached its carrying capacity, the growth slows down because there is only enough resources for a certain population now. Okay, so in the chat, why don't you respond if do you think this is a 0, a 1, or a 2? So what do you think student A would earn from the rubric? Okay, yes, and everybody's responding 2, and that would be correct, right? Both parts, the student addressed both parts of the question, and yes, good job, everyone. Yeah, very nice. Okay, let's look at example B now. This is student B. Now we have at point A, this population experiences a period of logistic growth. A population will increase rapidly because there is nothing stopping them. They have abundant resources. Once the population starts to slow in growth and reaches its carrying capacity at point B, it will stay at a steady rate. This population experiences logistic growth just like most populations do at some point during their existence. Okay, so let's try student B. What do we think? 0, 1, or 2? Okay, nicely done. Okay, so although this student obviously has a very high vocabulary, they did not explain how the resources were being limited in part B. Okay, and so that's why they only achieved 1 point. Okay, let's go to student C. So now we have, first, the population is rapid because the parameciums are reproducing and growing. But then the population hits the carrying capacity. This means for a couple of years, the population will stay the same with nothing affecting them. Okay, so how about 0, 1, or 2? Okay, we seem like we're on a roll. So yes, it did not state that at the very beginning there were abundant resources. So the student didn't state that. And so at point A, they're not answering that portion. And then at point B, they're saying the word carrying capacity, but you can't just throw out the word, right? If the student had used that word with other words to show that they knew that the resources were limited, well, then that's all good. But they're not really stating that they know that that's what that means. And so that's why it would be 0. Yes, that's did everybody see in the chat where Matthew was saying the student is required to state both of those, right? Not just, one of them, but talking about the resources. Okay, so let's look at student D. In part A, the population increases. In part B, the population reaches its carrying capacity, meaning that there are only enough resources in their environment to support a certain population, and the resources can't sustain any more paramecium. All right, what do we think? Oh, we already got people answering. Okay, very good. Okay, we are on a roll. So notice that in this section, or this student, I should say, that they didn't really answer the first question at all, right? They weren't talking about point A. Point B, they just nailed it. They totally got it. It's too bad that they hadn't expressed a little more in point A. They would have gotten all the points. Okay. All right. So very good. Hopefully that kind of gave you a little sense of how the rubrics are working with different questions. And I think, Matthew, these are just some, I don't know.
No, you're starting to get the hang of these, but there's only a very limited subset of questions that are available in California between our practice tests and our interim assessments, and it's sort of like you want more and more access to them, and so these are some places that you can go to look at some of the other computer scored tests, and like Oregon and Washington, they have exactly the same interfaces are. So if you actually want to have your students try it out there, you can use the exact same company's interface for it. But feel free to look around there and steal questions from other places so you can practice even more. But let's say you want to practice even more than even more. Sarah and Stephen, tell us about what everybody can win.
Absolutely. In fact, in terms of collections of items, for the state of California, is currently a project. It's helmed by a LACOE group that is compiling resources for performance tests in science that that come from all over the United States. And I believe they're looking for science teachers who are able to and interested in doing some of the piloting. So we'll drop our email address. We'd be happy to forward any names if that's something that you're interested in reaching out to them for. But Tools for Teachers is the current resource that is available. That includes science content, and we're gonna look really briefly at what that looks like. Here is the next slide in that series, but I'm gonna bring up the actual thing here, and I recommend you take a moment to do the same. This is smartertoolsforteachers.org, and I'll drop that link in the chat, or if you're following along, there is a link in the PowerPoint. And
Steve, are you going to take over with the sharing and demo, or somehow somebody took over my screen sharing? So I just wanted to make sure. Do you want it back up?
Yeah. Matthew, I believe I took over the sharing. Is that right? Sarah, can you see that? Or
yeah, we are now seeing Stephen's screen.
Got it. Okay.
It can be a little bit disorienting for me when I stop sharing. So I wanted to check with a third party there. Okay, so what you're seeing is me in Smarter Tools for Teachers not logged in. And I want to show you what not logged in is because I'm going to encourage you to log in. And the reason why is I'm going in and I'm choosing content area to look at. Here's science. There's 3 here. There's 3 domains or 3 areas. There's 3 domains listed, Earth and space, life and physical, and I only get four results showing, and that's not logged in. If I do this thing where I log in to California and I do the same, I'll get 92 resources, spoiler alert. Um, it will bring up an additional content area, science, engineering, technology and applications, and will bring up a full 92 results. In addition to that, I will be able to see the entirety of lessons plans and use and instruction and strategies, all well developed, all well aligned with state standards, and something that has been developed by teachers like you in the classroom. And so, well developed, well vetted, a lot more robust than some of the ways you could otherwise source lessons. So in the slides, it looks like this. How do you get there? Go to cast-lpac.org. You can click Tool for Teachers. You can also use the link. But most of the Smarter Balance things for the state of California are accessible through that cast-lpac.org site. So I recommend that as your core place to remember and start and go places from. And notice that I mentioned that logging in is going to be very important. You may have a login, and that login may be a login for testing, use of the interim assessments in the classroom. Maybe you have a login that allows you to see student data and the student's history of data in the California Educator Reporting System, CARS. That same login is the login for Tools for Teachers. You may not have those logins or not have them yet. If you don't, you should ask for them. You can ask a administrator at your site. If you know who the site coordinator for CASP and LPAC is or CASP is, they can get you a login for a interim assessment only role. And that will allow you to use the interims and access them, just like Sarah showed you how to log into that locked padlock area and find the full sets. Those are available with a login. But if you have that login, great. If you don't, ask for it. If you don't, and you want to see Tools for Teachers alone, there is a guide to how to self-register for Tools for Teachers, and you don't need permission as a California educator, as a California teacher, as someone who has an email address at a California school to get into Tools for Teachers. Here's how you do it. I'm not going to walk you through how you do it, but this will get you in. But best case scenario is you are in there already and can log in. Sarah?
Excellent. Matthew, do you mind bringing back up those slides for us?
Sure. Hold on one second here. Let me
Thank you.
get things ready. I think the next one is a question slide, but
No, I think we got a couple more Tools for Teachers slides. We're going to
okay.
start
All right.
on slide 50,
Hold on one second.
55, please.
Let me find. I've lost my. Is this the right one here? Here we go. Slideshow. 51.
Keep going. One more.
Okay. Did that do that?
There, right
Oh,
there.
good.
So as Stephen showed us how we get in, and once you've logged in, you'll have access to over 92 resources. You can see them sorted by grade, by domain, by strand. You can filter these to your heart's content to get to the resource that might be right for you. Let's get to that next slide. Let's take a look at what's offered in Tools for Teachers. These are fully actualized lessons. You can see here at the top, you can see how many likes it has. That's brand new. It hasn't really started, so not many people are liking the lessons just yet. You can bookmark it. What I always liked was that you can write little notes to yourself about how the lesson went. Like, this actually took 30 minutes when I thought it would take 60 minutes. And then when you go to use it next year and you go to your bookmark, you'll have all of your little notes. Those notes can also be shared. Let's say you're working with a team partner and you know that they also have access to Tools for Teachers, and you're like, this one is really good, you should use it. Rather than trying to guide them through the filters to find the right one, that little share button right there will take them exactly to this lesson. You'll see it has the performance expectations, the subject, the grade. There's a lesson goal. Many of them also have language goals. So if you're looking for your lesson plan and your objective, all of that is written for you. You were right with me, Matthew. You got it. The other thing that I know teachers really like is sometimes science takes a little bit of time and a little bit of preparation. Most tools for teachers' lessons, a lot of your work has been done for you. There's usually a presentation that you can download and tailor to your specific needs. There's usually an exit ticket of some kind. There's some worksheets that you might use. There's handouts. Sometimes there's activities that can take home, information for families. So Tools for Teachers is really a well fleshed out resource to give you some supplemental things that you can do to really support your students on the path to science mastery. I think there we go. So as I said before, there is that exit ticket. There's also an experimental debrief at times that'll tell you different ways that you can work with your students. Go one more. We talked a lot today about accessibility resources. Every single Tools for Teachers lesson has a section called Accessibility Strategies, and it will go over some strategies you might consider implementing to serve the different students within your classrooms. And with that, we're at questions and answers, and we're going to take a few minutes for question and answers at the end. So let's just go ahead and wrap up some of our information because we don't want anyone to miss out on Arlene. Go ahead, Arlene.
Well, just a little plug for the California Association of Science Educators, or CASE. A couple of things. It is only $30 for just general science teachers to be a member of CASE. There are a lot of benefits. Not only is there networking and resources and the conference, but also you kind of need to remember that they are looking out for teachers as far as science teachers, as far as the legislature is concerned, right? They're very active in making sure that promoting science education and bringing it to the forefront. And then our conference is in the middle of October. So it's October 17th. So it starts on a Friday. And so we encourage everybody to look that up and to become a member. So if you have any questions, you can always reach out. Uh-oh.
All right. We also want to let you know that our assessment unit here at LACOE also provides a bevy of opportunities for learning. If you are really interested in accessibility resources and want to learn more about how they can be used in everyday instruction to support all of your students, a universal design for learning, we'll be hosting a two-part free to everyone Zoom workshop, and we will be hosting it on part one with our Universal Design for Learning team, and part two will be with our special education department. So I just dropped our LACOE assessment unit catalog in there. One more slide for me, friend. If you have a friend who you're like, my goodness, I wish they had come to this thing. I want them to see it. You do have access to the recordings for all of it, but also we'll be doing this show again. This will be the Wintercast Academy, so encourage friends to come and learn with us. And with that, Matthew, go
which
ahead.
will be a repeat of the current session. So don't mark your own calendars if you've been here for all of our sessions. And just to remind you where we're going next, we are going to be looking at, now that we've learned what the test looks like, how do I change what I do every day to prepare for it, is what's coming up in session 3, 1 week from today. And this is a good place for us to stop for questions. We're not going to worry about the survey, Sarah. So questions, please drop them in our chat or anywhere else. Unmute.
Anyone has any questions at all, we are here for you. We can answer pretty much anything. If not, we'll get back to you next time, as you saw with our correction at the beginning. You can come off mute, you can drop it in chat, whatever is most comfortable for you. We can sing a little song. Just kidding, I'm not singing.
And if anybody wants to get going, we'll see you next week.
Our next session will be next week, and then the following one will skip a week in order to honor the holidays, and we will see you in beginning of October. Thank you so much for coming this evening. We hope to see you next session. If you have any questions, feel free to hang out for a minute. We're here for you.
Yes, thank you for coming.
Thank you to those of you who had your cameras on. Let's take a minute to
Oh, yeah.
celebrate you. Thank you. It's
Oh.
so nice not to shout into a black void. Thank you very much. We appreciate you.
I have a question.
Yes, I don't know who spoke first.
It's Irene.
Yes, hi Irene. Go ahead.
Um, is there a way we can a sample we can go over one problem in the interim assessment online to help us, get into the way we're supposed to present it to the class, just like a review?
Yeah. So if you have, do you have access to sign in to see the interims?
Um, I have to ask my admin.
Okay. So when you get that, there's this great side of the house called the viewing system, and it allows you to access it and see it exactly as a student will see it.
Okay, yes,
Stephen
ma'am.
is the man behind the curtain. He's going to pull that up for us.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Mhm. We'll see you next week.
Oh, no, stay on. Stephen's going to bring it
Okay.
up for you to show
Yeah.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Stephen, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Yeah, this is the easiest way, which is practice and training test doesn't require any login. And you can see what it looks like as a student. You're going to have to choose a grade level that tests, but here's a practice test, and you can use this with parents. You can use it for anything you want. Um, Takes a few steps to get into the test, but this is the open one. There is another system that Sarah mentioned, the interim assessment viewing system.
Mhm.
And if you go to interim assessments, all the resources for interim assessments are there. And the first one on the top left is the interim assessment viewing system. That requires a login. So I'm going to stop at some point before we see a bunch of items, but it has the same sort of format. You can see you can go in and look at the interim assessments for CAST for science. If you have access to that, you'll have a bunch of other access. Notice you'll have access to LPAC and Smarter Balance ELA, English, and Math. So you have to choose the science one. It doesn't say the word science there. It says CAST. And that will take you to some interim assessments that you can work through, and you could project, for example, interim assessments that require login on the board for students, have them take them, assign them to students, all sorts of uses for interim assessments.
Okay. Okay. Right. Thank you, sir.
Yep,
Try that. If I have a question, that lasts again next meeting.
absolutely. Or shoot us an email.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Stephen, do you want to go ahead and stop sharing so we can see the gallery and see if there are any other questions?
Absolutely. I think
I'm going to stop recording.